This video is part of a series about the Enhanced Data Display, or ED. ED was created as part of the National Weather Service's Weather Ready Nation pilot project based at Charleston, West Virginia. My name is Chris Leonardi, and I'm going to tell you about all the observation information available in ED. Now, before we begin, here are a couple of reminders. ED is still an experimental service and is under continuous development. You still may see bugs and data issues pop up from time to time. Also, as we release new versions, changes, additions, and deletions to the interface or features are possible at any time. Here are the topics we will be covering regarding observations in ED. We will be working with several different data sets, and I will show you how to view, manipulate, and monitor for changes. We will also be looking at precipitation totals and fronts in more detail, as well as other layers available in the More Layers section. Settle in and let's get started. Okay, Weather Observer, in case you need a reminder, here's the URL where you can access ED. So first we're going to show you how to enable observations and use the observation control window. You can start by clicking on the plus here in the Observations Quick layer, and you'll see the observations appear on the map here along with the observation control window. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the way we plot observations, you can click on the Help menu in the upper right, and in the window that pops up, look at the Observations Explained entry, and that will explain the plotting model to you. Now, notice that we start by default with both land and marine-based observations. If you would like to see only land observations, you can change this drop-down setting here, and that will filter them out for you, but I will leave the marine and land for this demonstration. Notice that the observations are really neatly spaced out. This is a decluttering algorithm that helps to keep the screen a little more readable. If you'd like to see more observations, possibly at the expense of screen readability, you can disable declutter observations here. And as I do so, you'll see a lot more observations appear on the display, although things become a little more cluttered, which is why we have a decluttering algorithm. I will go ahead and turn that back on to keep the screen readable. Now, there are a couple other screen readability options as well. You can change the size of the observation plots on screen here with this drop-down list. We have small, medium, and large available. Medium makes things a little bigger, while large, and you'll be able to read them from a pretty good distance away from the screen. I'll go ahead and knock it back down to medium for now. Also, you can change the density of observations with this slider bar right here. Pushing it off to the right will cause more observations to appear on the display with a higher density. If you deselect declutter, that will really cause a lot of observations to display. So you probably would not want to do that combination unless you have a very strong internet connection, and also unless you want to zoom in closer to see the observations in more detail. I'll knock back the density just a little bit here. Now, as far as what parameters are displayed on the plots, you have that control here with these checkboxes. You can make changes and then click the Apply button to apply them. So let's say, for example, I want to add dew point, remove the wind, and add sea level pressure. Clicking Apply will replot the observations, and you'll see the new information appear. As you see now, I have dew points as well as sea level pressure in areas that measures that capability. You can also look at ship observations with this checkbox here. They'll appear in water areas colored blue, like so. You can see them there over the Great Lakes. I'll go ahead and deselect these for now. You can change the wind units between knots and miles per hour with these radio buttons here. Now, if you take your mouse pointer and float it over one of the observation points, you'll get a pop-up window like so. That gives you the observation in more detail. I'll explain the buttons on the top a little later in the presentation. Now, if you find that distracting, you can disable that capability with this checkbox here, which is Disable Mouse Over. And by doing that, you'll see that the tables no longer pop up. Now, say for example, you would like to see only observations that have temperatures of 55 degrees or lower. What you can do is use the filter functionality. If you click the plus here in the filters, what you'll see is some new parameters show up at the bottom of the window. And now I can apply these filters. So what I'm going to do is apply a temperature filter. Let's say the highest I wanted to see was 55 degrees. I wanted 55 or lower. So if I change the high here to 55 and then click Apply, it will remove all the observations that are higher than 55 degrees. You can see a lot of the observations down here got removed. So this is a really powerful function if you just want to focus on the parameters that are really important to you. So that is your introduction to the observation control window and the basics of working with observations. Now we'll go ahead and talk about a couple of other ways to visualize the observation data. You can see I've got some observations from the Boston area here. I'll go ahead and float the mouse pointer over Logan Airport and bring up the same window that we talked about earlier. Now this time I will go ahead and click on the graph button, and that will bring up a window that defaults to a line graph of temperature over the past few days. And as you can see, I can take my mouse pointer and float it over the line and get individual values for the different observations. I can add different parameters as well with these checkboxes off to the right. For example, if I want to add dew point, I can simply click that. I can add wind direction and speed by clicking on these boxes. The direction is down here at the bottom with the wind barbs, and the speed is here in purple. And again, I can look at the different values through time. It's very easy to clutter this display, so you probably will only want to display 2 or at most 3 parameters at one time. You can also zoom in and out on this display as well by using the scroll wheel on your mouse like this, and you can see the graph zooming in and out as I do that. If you would prefer to see the observations in a tabular format as opposed to this graphical method, you can click on this tab here and we'll bring up a table with the observations all nicely laid out for you. Now you can see all the parameters here that are available. These are sortable, so if I click on temperature here, I can sort for highest temperatures or lowest temperatures through time. I can do the same with any other of these parameters as well. So again, that's another very nice and easy way to visualize this observation data. One final tab here, More Station Info, will go to the NWS website and give you some information on the observation site that you are looking at the time. So again, this little window is fairly powerful in giving you different ways to visualize the observation data, as well as giving you a little information on the area that the observation is based on as well. Now we'll go ahead and start with a blank slate here so that we can show you how we can display precipitation totals. If I click on the small raindrop here next to the plus on the observations quick layer, that will bring up this small interface that will allow me to bring up precipitation reports from 2 different sources, either MesoWest or CocoRa's. Let's start with MesoWest. If I click the checkbox, you'll see some amounts appear on the screen here. Notice they're color-coded by precip amount, and that you can float the mouse pointer to get more detailed information on different time periods. I can change the time period on the display by selecting these radio buttons. For example, here's 12-hour, and I can show different 12-hour precipitation totals. Here's 6, here's 3, and so forth. Now there is a density control as well, but that's not really working at the present time, so you'll probably just want to leave that at 3. So that is MesoWest reports. We also have CocoRa's. I'll go ahead and clear out MesoWest and put on CocoRa's. And these are ones that are reported by the public for the most part in measuring rain gauges in their backyards or their businesses or whatever. And there is a website for CocoRa's if you're interested in joining this network. And again, it uses the same display method, and you can float the mouse pointer over to get more information on the point. Currently, we are only showing rainfall totals using CocoRa's, but we are going to add snowfall capability in the near future. One other thing you'll notice, we do have a filter control, so if you want to filter out precipitation totals below a certain amount, you can do so. For example, I can filter out everything below an inch by simply moving the slider, and now you can see that everything is an inch and above on the display. So this is a really quick and easy way to show different precipitation amounts from different sources through ED. Next, I wanted to discuss the ObsWatch function, which is a relatively new feature of ED. What it will do is allow you to monitor observations for changes based on observation sites that you choose. To enable it, you click on the eye here in the observation quick layer, and we'll bring up a new window with observations already possibly pre-configured. I was using this earlier to monitor Boston, Norwood, and Providence. It helps if you know the 4-letter identifiers, and then you can type them into this display to monitor those observations. Let's say, for example, I wanted to change it to Pittsburgh, as well as, say, Erie, Pennsylvania. These are 4-letter identifiers. And now you can see I have Pittsburgh and Erie there on the display. And this window will refresh every 2 minutes with the latest observation information. You see this count down here at the top of the window. Don't be surprised to see this go negative once in a while. That is okay. It will still refresh every 120 seconds. Now there are other ways you can add observations to this display as well. Let's say I have some observations on the display here. And remember, if you float your mouse pointer over one of these locations, you will get a pop-up window. Remember, now we have these two buttons at the top of the information graph and add. If you click the add button, it will go ahead and add this observation onto the obs plot window, or rather the obs watch window. So if I click add here, you will see that there's a new observation here, the same one I clicked, New Philadelphia. So now it is monitoring that one along with Pittsburgh and Erie. You can also add observations across the entire map by clicking Sync to Map here. And if you do that, it will add all the observations currently in your viewing window. And you can see there's a pretty massive amount, over 1,200, almost 1,300 observations. Now typically you won't want to do that unless you're really zoomed into a small area. I will go ahead and deselect that, and it should go back to the same observations I was monitoring before, Pittsburgh, Erie, and New Philadelphia. You can also filter observations based on criteria you choose, similar to the other functionality in the main observation window. So for example, if I want to look at temperatures in this table that are greater than 60 degrees, which will then rule out Erie, I can simply change this to temperature is greater than 60, apply it, and you can see Erie is gone. Now I can clear the filter now, and Erie comes back. I can also have multiple filters as well. Let's reapply the temperature greater than 60, and now let's say I want an additional filter. Let's say RH greater than 60 as well. And I apply that, and now I have two filters in effect, and now there's only one observation that applies to both these filters, and that's Pittsburgh. Now to add additional filters, you have to have this combine checkbox clicked in order to use more than one filter. You can clear all the filters at once, or you can clear them one by one, like I'll do now. I can clear my RH filter, and it brings back New Philadelphia, but the temperature one is still in effect, so Erie is still missing. If I clear temperature, Erie comes back as well. So this is a very powerful window that allows you to monitor observations in real time, monitor for changes, and also filter out according to the criteria that you need. It is a very powerful and a new feature of ED. ED has a very rough capability to display fronts as well as high and low pressure centers. If you would like to see these, you can click on the front button here next to the Observations Quick Layer, and you will see the information pop up. Now the H's and L's obviously are high and low pressure centers, with the value underneath them corresponding to the maximum pressure for a high and the minimum pressure for a low. The lines represent the fronts. If you want to see what the different colors mean, you can click on the legend and you will see a graphic pop up showing you what color corresponds to which front. Now the main thing you might notice here is that the fronts are kind of derived from a series of straight lines rather than being this really smooth curved lines you're probably used to. The reason for that is that the fronts are derived from a series of points put out by the Weather Prediction Center in Washington, D.C. And unfortunately, there is no smooth GIS graphic of fronts available to us, so we are forced to derive them from a series of points. Now, although the fronts look a little unrealistically blocky, they still provide good information, and you can combine these with the surface observations to see the changes across different frontal boundaries. You can zoom in and zoom out, and the fronts will scale appropriately. So even though it's rough, it is very nice that ED has this basic capability to display highs, lows, and frontal boundaries. The last thing I want to remind you about is the fact that there are more observation tools available in more layers. So if you click the More Layers button, you will see the folders pop up here. And one of the folders that we have available is Observations, so we'll click that open real quick. Now, the majority of these have to do with precipitation accumulation, especially radar-derived precipitation. So if we click on one, say 12-hour precipitation, this will be the amount of rain, snow combined that's fallen over the past 12 hours. You can see some here along the Gulf Coast. Large area missing data with this particular layer. There are some other ones as well here, 12, 24, 48, 72-hour precipitation in a different style. So this one apparently has more data to work with, so that's a more complete picture. This is 48-hour precipitation when I'm recording this. Some other layers available to you are the RTMA layers, which stands for Real-Time Mesoscale Analysis. And that can give you a nice nationwide view of actual observations. It's similar to the NDFD graphics in the style of air temperature and wind speed and things like that. So here's air temperature. On top here I can put the wind velocity barbs, so you can see the wind speed here via the wind barb graphics. The last one that's really interesting, not necessarily weather related, but still very interesting, is the USGS earthquakes layer. Enabling that will enable you to see the latest earthquakes across the country, and in fact across the world if you zoom out enough on ED. And you can see some of the tremors that have happened here over the past several days. By floating the mouse pointer over, you get a few details. So check in the More Layers section from time to time to see if we've added more layers for observations or for any other weather data you might be interested in. Thank you for viewing this video and for using the enhanced data display. To leave feedback, use the feedback function in ED or post a comment on the enhanced data display page on Facebook.